Yeah, I'd like to formally introduce Van, and Van is former chairman of Anthroposophical Society in Hawaii. So it's Hawaiian society is different. It's staying separately from Anthroposophical Society in North America, and Van is also a long time teaching artist and international guest tutor at Steiner Waldorf teacher training centers and university, art departments in Asia, Oceania, and America. He is a council member of the visual arts section in North America, artistic director of the Antro Art Center in Taichung, Taiwan, a mentor for the Academy of Himalayan Art and Child Development, and is an editor of Pacific Journal. He is an active visual artist. Please check his YouTube channel. And award-winning author of numerous books. I quoted one of them, which is Ancient Sites of Oahu, best-selling book. And he lives and works in Honolulu together with his wife, Hawaii. Dear Van, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you, Andre. And hello, everyone. Aloha kako and Merry Christmas, Mele Kalikimaka. All of you probably know that this is a very special time of year between Christmas and New Year, between the solstice and Epiphany. And there are lots of pictures, lots of symbols, lots of imaginations for this time of year. We have Santa Claus, we have the Christmas tree, we have Charlie Brown and the Grinch, we have reindeer and snowmen, but there's a very deeply significant picture for this time of the year, and that is the mother and child, the Madonna Imagination. And I'd like to explore this picture a bit today. Rudolf Steiner had said that this picture of the mother and child, of the Madonna, is a curative, is a healing picture if taken in the right way. So I'd like to look at this image of the mother and child through history and some of the indications that Rudolf Steiner gave on this picture. So I will go to share my screen. Okay, I'd like to begin with a thought from Emil Bach, who was one of the founding priests of the Christian community, a renewal of religion at the beginning of the 20th century. And he said, people today have a tremendous hunger for pictures. This hunger is a symptom of the fact that humanity, through the destiny of our time, is being urged towards the sphere of imaginative perception. We satisfy this hunger creatively if we let the eye and heart dwell in active contemplation on works of art which have themselves arisen out of some measure of imaginative perception, and which can thus help to prepare the soul for this same inner sight. So looking at pictures can help to meet a deep need peculiar to the present day. Now, in trying to find the earliest mother and child images, I went back to Paleolithic times. And here you see 4 images. The one on the very left is one of the earliest dated Venus figurines, as early anthropologists called them, to name them after the Greco-Roman goddess of beauty, the feminine goddess Venus. And it's dated to about 36,000 BCE, before our common era. And these images, if you think of Rudolf Steiner's description of early humanity and how the human being was configured in such a way, having a softer body, malleable, that could change from inner experiences as well as from outer environmental influences. And the female developed faculties of memory, developing capacities of inner pictorial imagination that would lead to the possibility of moral guidance in humanity. Yeah, birthing took place at preordained times that were safe and helpful for incarnation at different times of year based on the stellar movements and so forth. Now, these images were actually thought to be made by the men as sort of sexual fetishes, little Playboy magazines, so to speak. But an art historian had the idea to photograph some of these images from above and then photograph pregnant women from above. So that what you would see as a pregnant woman, we men amongst this group, of course, never get this experience, but a pregnant woman can look down on herself and have this view as some of these images you see here. And you see how it's basically exactly the same as these Venus figurines, which are only very small. They're only several inches tall. But now historians are beginning to think, well, maybe the women, as they were going through pregnancy, were the ones who carved these from stone and bone. Yeah, it makes a little bit different picture, and one has the mother-child experience before the birth. Yeah, the unbornness experience is here in these Venus figurines. Here's another image from the south of France, a relief sculpture of one of these figures. And if you look at all of them, basically the head is underemphasized. There's no facial features. Hands and feet are usually left out, although here in this one, you see the figure is holding this cow horn, a crescent-shaped cow horn, at the level of her neck, and the other hand is on her belly, the Virgo part of the human being. And one sees that in these figures, as you saw earlier, it's the breasts and the belly and the buttocks that are emphasized. It's this welling up portion of the body from which birth takes place that is emphasized. As one leaves the Paleolithic period, which is well before the last ice age, well before the flood myths, you have those Venus figurines. And then this goddess culture, which one can find all over the world, with figures like Ishtar there on the left, this central goddess figure from Çatalhöyük in Turkey, one of the oldest cities in the world, and Artemis, the goddess Artemis, who is surrounded by these animal figures, many breast-like forms, egg-like forms around her chest, which actually were testes, bull testes, to show this reproductive power that the goddess Artemis had. And there's an interesting statement from biblical times in the English Standard Version of the Bible in Acts 19. It says, "And there is a danger not only that this trade of ours," these are the Hebrew peoples speaking, "may come into disrepute, but also that the temple of the great goddess Artemis may be counted as nothing, and that she even be deposed from her magnificence, she whom all Asia and the world worship." So this goddess worship was obviously very widespread, even in biblical times. And you can see these goddess images throughout the world. Here, you see a number of these. Also, in the wisdom of Solomon, in chapter 7, it says of this goddess of wisdom, referred to as Sophia, it says, like a fine mist, she rises from the power of God, a clear effluence from the glory of the Almighty. So nothing defiled can enter into her by stealth. She is the radiance that streams from everlasting light, the flawless mirror of the active power of God, and the image of his goodness. She is but one, yet can do all things. Herself unchanging, she makes all things new. Age after age, she enters into holy souls and makes them friends of God and prophets. For nothing is acceptable to God but the person who makes his home with wisdom, with Sophia. Now, these are the oldest images I've been able to find so far of an actual birthed child with a mother. These from the Near East, from Lebanon and Canaan. You can see the very unusual terracotta forming of the heads and the figure. But this is right at the same time of the Egyptian culture. And one has, of course, this mother goddess, Isis, who wears the cow horns with the sun's solar disk held within its crescent, and nurturing the sun god Horus, her child, with Osiris. I have this wonderful first real establishing of the picture of the mother and child, the nurturing of the child by the mother. The central faience figure, you see, she has the throne on her head to show that she is of this divine origin. Rudolf Steiner wrote an interesting verse which goes, Isis-Sophia, wisdom of God. Lucifer has slain her, and on the wings of the worldwide forces carried her forth into cosmic space. Christ will, working in the human being, shall wrest from Lucifer, and on sails of spirit knowledge call to new life in human souls. Isis-Sophia, wisdom of God. And elsewhere, Rudolf Steiner clarifies that we have the Christ in everything around us, in the world, imbued in all of creation. But it's the wisdom of God, the wisdom of Christ, that we don't have. It's this wisdom, this Sophia, the purified astral body that we need to develop. Here are some more images from around the world: Babylon, South America, India, the Asian subcontinent, of the mother and child picture. Most religions, most cultures have used this picture of this human characteristic of giving over oneself to the helpless child. Even into Greco-Latin times, we see this image developing towards the Christian icon image that you see on the right. This image on the right is claimed to have been painted by Saint Luke, who was the physician painter, the doctor artist. You could say the first curative Christian painting. Although it's only really dated to be 1,000 years old. It couldn't have been painted by Luke, but you see its pigments are painted on leather, and it's been later imbued with a halo of silver and silver hands and necklace as further iconic embellishments. This is the statement that inspired me to, as a visual artist, to look into these images of the Madonna and Child, where Rudolf Steiner describes how the Isis image has this bearing of what he says, the great healing principle to which humanity can attain when it steeps itself anew in spiritual wisdom. What remained of this wonderful symbol of the mother and child, we see in many pictures of the Madonna. We assert that these pictures have a creative, sorry, the pictures over on the side are blocking my view. I wonder, Andre, could you read the rest of this? We assert that these pictures have a curative effect. Yeah, the pictures of the Madonna is a means of healing for us.
When it's viewed and studied in such a way that it has an after effect upon the human soul, when this human soul can dream during sleep about the Madonna picture, it then possesses a healing power even today.
Thank you. Here he's saying if one can take this picture into one's sleep life in such a way that one can dream of these images, that it actually becomes a curative, a healing property in one's life. And then as we come into the Christian era, we can see the Madonna and Child portrayed in such a way where you see the head and the heart, the hands of the Madonna. She's usually completely covered. We'll see in the early images, the child also is covered, but later becomes naked. And this very intimate connection of the two. Often the view is sorrowful. In Aramaic, the word black actually means sorrowful. Aramaic was the language of Jesus, and it means sorrowful. And that's how Isis was also described in searching for Osiris when Seth Typhon cut him up into pieces and scattered him over the earth. Here we see images of what are called the Black Madonna, a very extensive Christian cult that one can see also in full body sculptures. Here you see the famous one from Montserrat in Spain on the left, and Our Lady of Guadalupe. This is Guadalupe, Spain. And one I saw last year in Prague at the House of the Black Madonna in the Czech Republic. And it's interesting that Pope St. Gregory the Great said, now here again, I've got images that are blocking the text here. Andre, are you able to read this? Could you read this for us?
Pope St. Gregory the Great, in a letter to priests written in 601. We may even wonder whether pagan statues of mother and child were thought to someone other than Virgin Mary and her son, Jesus. For Roman Catholics, Mary is the woman. Similarly, the only child worthy of special note is the Christ child. Like an explicit identification, it seems natural that Christians read these perspectives into any art they saw. In fact, it seems that Eusebius of Caesarea took advantage of this predisposition, sublimating any pagan roots, which he considered unlikely, used an image of the Black Madonna as preparatio, evangelical preparation, a readily accepted introduction of the full Christian mystery, which is indeed centered on the world's incarnation through Mary.
Thank you, Andre. What Gregory was saying 1,500 years ago is that, yes, we can borrow these earlier pagan images and we can apply the fact that the woman is the woman Mary, which in the year 431 AD was named the Mother of God by the Council of Ephesus, by the Catholic Church. And we can say that the child depicted is the Christ child, and that there was precedent for doing this. In fact, we see this in Hawaii all the time. All the Christian churches were basically built on the old heiau, on the old Hawaiian temples, so that the people who went and worshiped their pagan gods and goddesses would then come to the new religion. Even the Black Madonna was then named to be Mary. Even in Mexico, you have a different Lady of Guadalupe. And here you see how her image was, as it were, imprinted on the poncho of one of the believers and is framed there outside of Mexico City, and in a vision that he had. And although she doesn't have a child in her hands, you can see that there's a black sash around her waist, which was an Aztec tradition that pregnant women would wear a black sash to show that they are in pregnancy. So this older tradition is carried on there for the Indian peoples of Mexico. But then we come into the Byzantine style of Christian Madonna and Child pictures. You see this sorrowful look in the eyes. Yeah, it's an inner gaze, and yet it's an outer gaze. Very, very poignant, these icon images. And then this wonderful transition from the Byzantine style into the early Renaissance, from Duccio to Giotto, where you begin to see volume in the figures of Giotto and indication, a slight indication of perspective in the figures going back into a background, even though it's still a gold background, rather than overlapping perspective. And this is the beginning of naturalism in painting. And then, of course, one comes into the Renaissance, and with artists like Lippi and Leonardo, you have a much more naturalistic, realistic depiction of the Madonna and Child, but starting to bring her out of this spiritual space of the gold background into a little portal where you can see we're coming into the world of nature out through the window behind her. But one of the most prolific and poignant artists of the Renaissance to paint Madonna and children pictures was Raphael. Raphael Santi did over 40 Madonna and Child pictures during the course of his life. And Rudolf Steiner said of him, Raphael is valued so highly because to a greater extent than any other painter, he was able to clothe the spiritual in the sense perceptible representation. And of course, Rudolf Steiner went into speaking about Raphael in over 60 lectures that he gave, some focused entirely on him, some just mentioning him in passing. But he featured very strongly, even in the last address of Rudolf Steiner that he gave, because of the incarnations that Rudolf Steiner describes he had as a prophet, as a priest, and of course his artist, painter incarnation, and then later as the poet Novalis. So I'd like to like to show you a few images of work that Rudolf Steiner did with this theme of the mother and child. And these are images from Revelation. They were described by John the evangelist when he was exiled to Patmos, and he had these visions that have been throughout art history, have been encapsulated in pictorial form. And Rudolf Steiner piggybacked on this tradition of making the seven seals into images, into pictures. And you can see those there on the left side. And one of them is described in the Bible as a great and wondrous sign appearing in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and a crown of 12 stars on her head. She was pregnant and cried out in pain as she was about to give birth. And of course, there are the opposing forces to this birth that are trying to subdue the birth of this son, the birth of this son child. And this is first image. He had an artist paint these for a conference that he was directing in Munich in 1907, and Clara Rettig was the artist who painted them. And he goes on later, following this tradition of the Madonna clothed in the sun, giving birth to the sun, sitting on the moon, which we can see in many, many different artists' renderings. He goes on to then, in the last year of his life, to paint two of these Madonna and Child pictures. In February of 1924, he does the one on the left over a series of days. And this is for the artist Henny Geck, who has a small painting school at the Goethe-Annum, Dornach, Switzerland. And he does another one in chalk pastels for teenagers, which he asks them to re-render in watercolor. And he does that on one day. And there's actually a description that Louise van Blumenstein has of him doing this pastel sketch. If we look at the Christmas verse, which is the one we've just been using, most of you have probably been using this verse over the past week. I feel the spirit child set free from spell in womb of soul, the holy cosmic word conceived in clarity of heart, the heaven fruit of hope, which joyous grows out of my being's godly ground. But if we take the verse that was being used at the time he painted and drew these two Madonnas in February, it would be, there will emerge out of the womb of worlds to quicken senses shine the joy in growth. Now may it find my force of thought, well armed through forces of the gods, which forceful live within myself. Here, a year before he did those two Madonnas, he did this pastel sketch, which then Henny Geck on the right rendered into watercolor. This was how he was giving painting indications to this small school at the time in Dornach. He would do these quick sketches and ask the painters to render them in watercolor. And you see this Madonna and Child with the adoration of the Magi, the three kings coming with their gifts. And the Madonna stands above a rose cross, showing this Rosicrucian path that the Sophia is connected to. And there's one last image that Rudolf Steiner had a connection with. Asya Turgenev, a Russian artist who was working on the glass windows for the second Goethe Annum. She actually assisted in the windows of the first Goethe Annum, but then actually did the ones for the second Goethe Annum. And she was working together with Rudolf Steiner on developing drawing techniques for black and white drawing, for light and dark. And she showed Rudolf Steiner this Madonna. She called it the Madonna of the Steppes. And she asked whether the aura was correct, whether the aura looked all right. And Rudolf Steiner said, here, and began working on it and began shading around it and said, it's be something like this. And then she took the sketch back and he said, but it's not quite right. And we need to do something further. And that was when he then developed with her, together with her, the technique which was used in the glass windows of the second Goethe Annum, this slant line stroke, which you don't quite see here yet. It's beginning to happen. It's more like a cross-hatching in this picture. But it's interesting that he was sort of spurred on to develop this black and white technique from this sketch. And Andre, pictures on the side here are blocking my view of this. How about you read in a good Russian accent Solovyev's quotation here?
Oh, specifically for Vladimir Solovyov. Three встречи, three meetings. Let it be known, today the divine feminine is descending to earth in an incorruptible body, in the unfading light of the new goddess. Heaven has become one with the depths. Vladimir Solovyov, three meetings.
Thank you. And what I think I'd like to do before we go on with looking at some of Raphael's images is to break here and see if there are any comments from any of you, any questions that have arisen from the first part of what we looked at. Maybe I'll just read this quotation from Rudolf Steiner where he says, we experience when we gaze upwards with deep feeling to the Madonna, how our soul partakes of the great cosmic mystery. We can feel in such surrender of the soul how the eternal feminine within us yearns searchingly for the divine Father Spirit, which is born out of the cosmos, and to whom we give birth as the sun in our own soul. We can discover in the Madonna what we are as human beings and how we are related to the universe. I do have a number of other slides I'd like to show, but I'd like to take a few minutes just to relieve you from hearing my voice and see if there are any questions on what we've looked at so far. If you just unmute yourself, go ahead and speak up.
Without raising hands. Yes, go ahead, Franz.
Looking at the image that you had, the one image in black and white that was the Madonna sitting in the moon, reminded me of Steiner's talk about his quest for the Holy Grail. And that image of the moon seems to be, that phase of the moon seems to be the image of the Grail vessel that Steiner was talking about. He said if you can read the occult script along the edge of the moon, you will see that this is where the blood of Christ is in this image. So I wondered if you just had any thoughts about that.
There is definitely in that crescent moon image this relationship to the vessel, to the Grail. Yes. in symbolic form, in pictorial form. I don't have much more to add about that, however.
Well, it just seemed to me that there's a kind of beginning and end, right? There's the birth, and then the mother with the child, and then in the end, the vessel is carrying the blood of the child, right?
Yeah.
So there's a kind of wholeness to the. I don't know whether it means anything or not.
Yes. No. Nice. Good thought. Good thought there. Yes. Anyone else?
Well, and the idea that the crescent moon is pregnant with the full moon.
Yeah. And in that early image I showed of the relief of the Venus figurine holding the crescent cow horn, it has 13 incisions along it, 14 sections to sort of show how the moon goes through phases, half of a moon phase from new moon to full moon. Yeah, the cow horn is very significant, as you know, as any biodynamic farmer would know, how fertile it is in its form. Yeah, that's a nice thought, Monica. Thank you.
Up until a certain point, all the Christ children were suckling on the left breast of the Madonna. And there was a time when the child was on the right. And that was when the child was not suckling. And, you know, like, for example, in the last Raphael that you showed, that, you know, the Christ child is sitting, looking out at us with the Madonna. So that seems another development in the image.
Nice observation. And we're going to look at some pictures where we see this movement of the child in relation to the Madonna in just a few moments. Yeah, nice point, Nicole. Anyone else? Perhaps we should go back to the images, unless there's any other comments. Well, this is this quote again from Rudolf Steiner, how Raphael was able more than anyone else during his time to clothe the spiritual realities in sense perceptible colors, forms, and so forth. And here you see a detail of the Sistine Madonna. The Sistine Madonna, which was commissioned in 1514, I believe, for a church in northern Italy. In the 1740s, it was bought by the Emperor of Poland, a Holy Roman Empire, and went to Dresden, where his kingdom was. It was something like 120,000 francs, which was the most ever paid for a work of art until that time and for the rest of the 1700s, and became really the object of the beginnings of art historic critiques as, you know, what is beauty? What is art? And the whole founding of aesthetics was based on this picture. Rudolf Steiner said that this detail could be used in a Waldorf kindergarten. So you sometimes see that in Waldorf schools. But on the right, you have a sculpture also commissioned by Pope Leo II, but done by Michelangelo, a figure of Moses holding the Ten Commandments, and made to look like the warrior Pope Leo II. Very, very strong, very muscular. When Michelangelo finished this, he tapped the knee of the sculpture with his hammer and said, "Speak." He considered this really even beyond his David and Pietà as one of his most perfected sculptures. And it's interesting to see, done right at the same time by these two contrasting artists, this feminine and masculine appearance, these pictures of this contrast. Now, there was this young man named Felix Pipers who consulted with Rudolf Steiner, first met Rudolf Steiner in 1902. He went through medical school in Munich and began to ask Rudolf Steiner questions. He was actually a very artistic fellow. He acted in many of the mystery dramas, actually played Benedictus in the first mystery dramas. But he had an interest in sacred architecture and was involved in the helping of the building of the first Goethe Annum. However, his parents died when he was young, and his guardian encouraged him to go into medicine. And as a doctor, he consulted with Steiner, became one of the first medical doctors to work out of indications by Rudolf Steiner. And he developed, on Steiner's recommendations, Platonic solids as little chambers, which he then flooded with colored light, and would have patients look at a picture of the Sistine Madonna before they went into these color therapy chambers. And then he would, in meditation outside, follow them as they sat in these colored Platonic chambers. So this young doctor, he was 12 years younger than Rudolf Steiner, developed the first color therapies based on anthroposophy. And it was from him that this curative pentagram of images was developed. There's not any real recorded data on whether Rudolf Steiner suggested this or whether Pipers came up with the idea, but they obviously worked together in some way with these images. So what you see is 12 images of the Madonna and Child laid out on a pentagram, a five-pointed star. There are then 2 images outside and 1 image inside. Raphael has done the paintings. Donatello did one of the sculptural reliefs, and Michelangelo did one of the sculptures that are involved in this curative exercise. Here you see the 3 images that are outside, the 2 high ones, the Sistine Madonna and the transfigured Christ figure, a detail, but then the portrait of the transfigured Christ is in the middle of the pentagram. So number 1 is the Sistine Madonna. Number 15 is the transfigured Christ, a painting that Raphael did, his last painting. It was on his easel when he died at age 37 on a Good Friday, his birthday. And the portrait of that transfigured Christ in the center of the pentagram. At number 5, at the very top, at the head of the pentagram, is the Pazzi Madonna by Donatello, and number 13 is the Bruges Madonna by Michelangelo. And then all the other images are by Raphael. Now, Rudolf Steiner describes in his esoteric lessons how we have a stream of formative forces, an etheric meridian that goes from our left foot up to the center of our head, to our forehead. He describes a quarter of an inch below the skin between the eyebrows. And then it goes down to the opposite foot, and then up again to the opposite hand, across through the arms, through the chest and the heart, over to the other hand, and then back down to the left foot. Rudolf Steiner says there are many other meridians, there are many other flows or currents of the etheric through the body, but this is a particularly healing and harmonizing current. And this is one that the Pythagorean brotherhoods actually had as a symbol that they would show to alert others that they were a member of the Pythagoreans. And the letters that were inscribed at the points of the star spell out the word Hygeia, the Greek goddess of health. So it's interesting, this connection of the pentagram with the etheric body and with this curative exercise, this healing exercise. Now, if we look at the entire pentagram, the Sistine Madonna is the first image that one would look at. One would contemplate this picture and then go down to the left foot, which you see there is number 2. And there at number 2, on the far left, you have the image of the beautiful gardener painted by Raphael. And from there, one ascends up this leg of the pentagram to the head, going through an image, the entire image of the Alba Madonna, and then a detail of the Alba Madonna, and then to the Pazzi Madonna by Donatello. And what one wants to observe is how the position of the child changes, moves, actually moves up the figure of the Madonna, and then shifts to the other side when it gets to the top in the Donatello. At the end, I'd like to conclude by actually going through this sequence quietly, but I'd like to lead you through it so you know where we're going with it. So from the very crown of pentagram with the Pazzi Madonna, one then descends all the way down to the right foot. And one has there the detail of the Madonna and the goldfinch. You have John the Baptist on one side holding the goldfinch and the Christ child between the legs of the Madonna on the other side. In the landscape, one has the bridge across the river and the rough water, and behind the Christ child, the smooth water, the peaceful landscape into the distance. And then from the lower foot on the right side, the Madonna of the Goldfinch goes up to the Bridgewater Madonna, and this kind of sliding of the child up across her midsection to then be held in this detail of the Sistine Madonna. And then from the Sistine Madonna on the left, one goes over, jumps over to the opposite hand, the Tempe Madonna, but then recognizes the head of the Christ in his transfigured form. This is the transfiguration is when Christ comes to Mount Tabor with three of his disciples and shows them his spiritual being, which essentially overwhelms them. It's a picture that often people mistake for the resurrection, as it is a kind of resurrecting out of the physical. And then from the Tempe Madonna, which you see there on the upper right, one descends down through the largest number of Madonnas, the Granduca Madonna, a detail of the Madonna of the Fish, and then Michelangelo's Bruges Madonna, and the entire picture of the Madonna of the Goldfinch, and finally back to the beautiful gardener. Now, so that's the entire image, which then one goes outside and above to the right, where the figure of the transfigured Christ is in the Orontes gesture of the etheric life forces, formative forces body. Again, Rudolf Steiner, pictures of the Madonna are such holy things apart from any religious dogma. And then again, the Madonna represents what can be born out of the human soul, the true higher self, which slumbers in every human being, the best of humanity, which streams and weaves through the world as spirit. Now, these are some of the resources if you want to look into the Healing Madonnas series. The late Christopher Bamford did a wonderful book trying to pull together a lot of information on the Madonnas. Brian Gray has actually, you may have seen in the diagrams there, Brian Gray has connected the 12 images on the pentagram with the signs of the zodiac. And he goes into that in his little booklet, Discovering the Zodiac in Raphael's Madonna series. The Anthroposophical Society in America has some video recordings that if you go to their website, they've recorded little conversations on the different images. And down below you have, if you want to screenshot that, if you want to get the series of pictures in postcard forms or in larger reproductions, they're available from Windstone Press. So how I thought we could close would be to go through this series, and I would give you 30 seconds on each picture, a half a minute, to contemplate particularly how the child moves through the situation in each picture. And just let that resonate with you. Yeah, let your eyes focus on the picture. Let your heart feel artistically what is happening in the image. Okay, so let's begin with the first image. This is the Madonna series by Raphael. And Rudolf Steiner did another verse, which I feel goes very well with this, where he says, on the cross of the world body, the world soul reveals herself, living in 5 radiant streams through wisdom, love, power of will, all sense, and I sense. She finds in herself the world spirit. So, and I meant to also mention that on the, what is it called? The Front Range Anthroposophical Cafe just last month, Christine Sommerfeld did a nice series on this where she goes through with accompanying lyre music to the pictures. So there are different ways that this series of the Healing Madonnas have been used, mostly in Camp Hills. Some individuals in Waldorf schools have used this, and it can bring home, I think, the importance of pictures as the symbols, as the representatives, as the outer form of archetypes and of spiritual activities, spiritual beings, which of course is what one wants to get closer to through observing any picture. So that's what I had wanted to explore a little bit with you. If you have any further comments, any further questions, any observations, do we have time for that, Andre?
Yes, dear one, we have time for it. And it will be nice if people will raise hand, electronic hand. So, Nicola again. Nicola?
There we go. Hi. Thank you. I just think your point at the end is really, really important about the potency of symbols. I've been working with the Maheshwara, which is the Vedic mantra of creation. And though there are symbols, the phonemes, the alphabet is meaningful. I mean, I know that Steiner, studied Sanskrit and the Vedas as well. And yes, I mean, it was a beautiful, yeah, I've really got nothing more to say, no clear question or anything. I mean, just, yes, you left it with that very potent area. So thank you.
Mm. Thank you, Nicola. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, Tessa?
Yes, hi, Van. Thank you. That was so lovely.
Hey, Lisa.
Hi. I was wondering if this series, or are you saying that that you can heal something that happened in the past when to a family member or so that suffered something in childhood that has affected them to this day, that through looking at these pictures, can you walk back into the past and heal something through these images?
I don't know that I would go so far as to say specifically they would heal this or that, but that this series, because it's working with this meridian of the left foot to the pineal gland to the right foot and through the heart and so on, that it's working with a healing stream that is particularly potent for an individual as a curative effect. Whether that would work back into former traumas, I wouldn't really be able to say, but it could be while trying. Yes.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, Deborah, please.
Hello. I have been presenting the Madonna pictures with Lyre for over 20 years. And we use a bit different order, but that doesn't make much sense to go into now. But I have a point to make in talking about the picture of the meridians that you showed with the arrows on there, as opposed to the picture of the Madonnas in the order. And I just want to make sure that people understand and then ask a question where that came from. That I understand that when Steiner was talking about viewing a picture, that it's not, and viewing actors on stage, that one sees everything in a mirror image. So that when you see the stage left, that's your left foot, and it goes up then the other, just as you showed. But in the picture of the meridians, it shows the opposite, which is like as if you're in the direction looks opposite, but it's more like when you're participating in eurythmy, and it's always like you're in a circle, it's going around from a direction that may be viewed as opposite, but it's really a different perception that's going on there. Can you speak to that at all? And do you know where Steiner talked about this?
Yeah, that can be, as you mentioned, when doing eurythmy with someone who's moving and you're seeing them across the room, it's opposite. It's mirrored. Yeah, so that your left foot corresponds to let's see if I can go back to the image.
Yeah, so the point I was making is that you start at this left foot, but that is your left foot.
Yes.
And you go up from the left to the right to the head. But if you go back to the image that you have of the meridians, it looks like it's the opposite, but it's not really, I think.
Yeah, this I can't, my arrow doesn't point to it, but in this diagram, one is looking over to the left. The Madonna down at the left is where one begins because you're facing that left foot.
Right. So it's just like when you're looking in a mirror, that's your left foot. It's going that way. But can you go to the picture of the streams that you showed?
So here you see from the left foot, when we're looking at that person, it's their left foot from our vantage point, but for them, for that image, for that picture, you would say that's your right foot. We're the ones experiencing it from our left foot.
You could say that you're facing this person.
Exactly. That's the point I'm trying to make. Exactly.
You're facing him as
Exactly.
if you were looking at yourself in a mirror. But if you consider it that way, then it all makes sense.
Yeah, exactly.
Facing you. You're facing each other.
Or if you're wanting to feel yourself to be that image, it's the back of the person.
Yes.
Yeah.
I just thought maybe people might get confused by seeing arrows in the different order because it takes a while to sort it out.
Yeah. Very good. Thank you for bringing that up because that can be a sticking point.
Thank you very much. So Leon is next.
My favorite of all these Raphael pictures is the Sistine Madonna, of course. But there's always something about it that bothers me. At some point in my life, I was doing a lot of portraiture and figure drawing. And the proportions of the female figure there, they seem really elongated. The usual proportions of 8 heads to the body are the legs seem elongated. It doesn't occur in any of the other pictures. Like if you look at you showed Bamford's book, the normal height would be to the feet just above the title of the book on the jacket. I wonder if you have any kind of comment on that. The only thought I had about it was if the picture was originally hung to be looked at upward, not just from in front, but looking up at it, it could create an exaggerated foreshortening, which would indicate an impression of increased height of the figure.
Well, Leon, have you ever looked at Michelangelo's Pietà of the mother and the dead Christ in her lap? If she stood up next to that 33-year-old man she has on her lap, she would be probably 12 feet tall. The proportions are very out in that, and yet Michelangelo has made that Pietà seem quite natural.
I've only seen photos of it, so yeah, he sure did.
And so here in the Sistine Madonna, where you have Sixtus on the left and St. Barbara on the right, the 2 angels down below, and they're actually forming a kind of 5-pointed star right there in the composition.
Yeah.
That this seeming elongation puts her in a perspective that also, if you look at Raphael's Transfiguration, which he uses in this sequence, the perspective is completely askew. It has nothing to do with the realities of physical dimensions. And so she has this sort of erect eye capacity in her whole gesture because of this elongation. And I think you have to look at it in that sense that it's an aesthetic, I wouldn't say trick, it's an aesthetic technique for bringing one into a different feeling than one would have with just the naturalistic depiction of the physical body. Yeah.
So the idea of it being hung so you would look up at the picture in some sort of awe is not correct. It was always to be looked at from straight on.
Well, no, it was an altar painting, so you would be looking slightly from below.
Ah, okay. So yeah,
It'd be a little at the two putis, the two little angels there at the bottom, gazing up at the Madonna.
very good. Okay, thank you.
May I ask a question?
Of course, Helena. Sure. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. I just would like, can you tell me something more about that in earlier times the Christ child was dressed completely and you showed us pictures and then it was naked?
Yeah, that I believe has to do with the gradual transformation of consciousness that takes place during medieval times into the Renaissance. And in the Renaissance, where consciousness, soul is beginning to hover nearby, so to speak, the Greek aesthetic, this Renaissance being the reawakening of the classical understanding, the Christ child becomes more pure in its depiction as being naked. The same thing happens in Greek sculpture as you go through classical times, from the early archaic, where figures are completely clothed except for the men. The men are naked, the women are clothed, and by the Hellenistic period in Greek sculpture, you have the complete reversal, where the women are naked and the men are more clothed. So it's kind of a, I guess you would say, a consciousness shift in how to depict the human being. And one sees an echo of that in the depiction of the Madonna and Child, with the child going from being clothed to being naked. Look at it in terms of the more pure human being, unclothed, uncloaked.
You know, well, maybe it also relates to Gabrielic age, which was preceding age to Michaelic. And Gabriel also relates to forces of procreation. So, and you can see, I mean, significant changes in visual arts. People getting undressed, and, you know, you can see all this beauty of naked body.
Yeah.
Thank you.
There was a very beautiful image of a Madonna with a heart in the midsection, belly area, stars above, moon below. I think it was a black and white image. I cannot remember who the artist was that you showed.
Most likely this is Albert Dürer.
Yeah.
This is black and white, yeah?
All right. It was, to me, the essence of what the realization of this presentation is, in the sense that the radiance spirit of Christ was coming out of the Sophia wisdom. And I feel that, no, it is not that one.
No?
It was a sun in the center of the figure. I think it was
It's maybe Asa Turgenev's, right?
could be. Yes.
You know, very
I think
simple
it was
drawing, right? Like a sketch.
Yes.
Yeah, Asa Turgenev.
Oh,
Asa Turgenev.
this one.
No, not that. It was just the whole center of her figure was the sun.
Oh, one of seals, apocalyptic seals.
There.
Okay.
Yes, that's another version of it. Yes. But anyway, the idea is that the ancient wisdom of Sophia is then all of a sudden, with the birth of Christ, and obviously the sun is in the position of being born there, brings out the radiant spirit of Christ.
Mm-hmm.
I loved the image.
Yeah.
I think it was black and white, but it was very similar to this. Stars above, sun in the center, and standing on the moon.
I can't think of the one that it was if it wasn't that.
It was off to the right side of the screen.
Oh, was it the Guadalupe? No,
No,
wasn't one of those.
no.
Okay.
It was a drawing.
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay, well,
That would be.
it was very beautiful. Maybe I imagined it.
I'll look through them again, see if I can find that.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, Rudolf Steiner describes in the Gospel of St. John in those lectures how when the initiate purifies the astral body, this is what can be called in esoteric Christianity the Sophia, and that when one lives in that experience of the Sophia, the Isis-Mary Sophia, as Rudolf Steiner calls it, then one has an illumination which is described as the Holy Spirit.
Okay, so Richard is next.
I mentioned this because somebody else said, again, a little confused with left-right orientation. So when I am doing this, just tell me which foot I start with.
Left.
Start with left foot. Okay, thank you.
Your left.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much.
So at this special time of year, it can be a wonderful practice to simply observe the Madonna and Child images, something like the Sistine Madonna, to contemplate that. Take that into your sleep life, if not the entire Madonna series. So, Andre, over to you.
Yeah, dear Van, mahalo, and thank you so much for your presence and for your wisdom and for your beautiful show. So, dear friends, please feel free to unmute your machines and say big thank you to.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. That was completely worth it.
Thank you.
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 Thank you all.
A blessing to be together today. Thank you so much.